What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This here is Legitical Response. We cover political news, and we have some more Supreme Court decisions that just came out, and it's very, very good news for the American people.
The Supreme Court overturned a 40-year precedent in Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council that could have sweeping implications for the environment, public health, and the workplace.
This is something that has been in the crosshairs of conservative jurists for a long time. And there's been no secret of the fact that when it comes to certain decisions, and this is one of the big ones called Chevron deference, that this is something that conservative jurists have said it's inappropriate that we defer this much to executive agencies.
The decision is expected to affect a wide array of federal regulations and hands an important victory to conservatives who have sought for years to rein in what they call, quote, the administrative state. In another ruling, the Supreme Court said cities can ticket people experiencing homelessness for sleeping outside. City and state leaders watched the decision closely as surging homeless encampments cropped up across the nation.
As a result of this decision, we are able to enforce the law and to clear the encampments off the street now.
Another Friday ruling said the DOJ overstepped by pursuing obstruction charges against January 6th rioters. That decision could have implications for former President Donald Trump, who is facing charges related to that event and claims he should have absolute immunity as president.
This ruling is not the end of these charges for the former president.
The administrative state, with Joe Biden still in office, is slowly being dismantled. Yes, that is right. This Chevron decision. You might hear Chevron decision in the news and think, oh, well, that ain't nothing. Well, blah, blah, blah. What some oil company got to do with anything, right? Well, that Chevron deference is very impactful. Having that overturned impacts a lot of stuff, right? Like, that is basically, I'm going to try to boil this down right quick. What it was a decision by the Supreme Court that says that when it comes to federal administrative rules, like the pistol brace rule or some of Joe Biden's insane climate rules, right? Like trying to shut down coal-fired power plants. When it comes to those rules with Chevron in place, if there was any litigation involved, like somebody sues to stop this rule from being put into place, when it goes to court, it basically put a finger on the scale in favor of the administration. So in other words, they could pretty much do anything they want. They say it's within reason, right? Reasonable regulations. They'll defer, that's the deference part, they'll defer to the three-letter agency because they're experts at this, right? But we know that the Biden administration is full of activists, right? Like the Chevron was put in place during a time when the federal government wasn't full of activists and people actually followed the facts and followed logic to implement rules and regulations. Nowadays, we've got climate zealots and far-left extremists filling the ranks of the administration, and these people are putting insane rules and regulations, right? Once again, like the good neighbor policy that was put in place by the Biden administration that basically would, by 2030, shut down almost every single coal-fired power plant in the United States, right? Like the Supreme Court may have just stopped energy grid apocalypse from happening, right? Like the Biden administration wanted these coal-fired power plants to shut down if they didn't put in technology that's not fully developed on the smokestacks to capture CO2, right? The technology to do that is 2 or 3 years away from being developed, right? So we have 6 years from right now until 2030 before they would try to shut these coal-fired power plants down. So 2 to 3 years out to get the technology fully developed. That leaves 3 to 4 years to install and implement this technology on every single coal-fired power plant in the country. Otherwise, it'd be shut down. And the bad part is, right, like, sure, go ahead. Like, your climate agenda, whatever. I don't care. Sure, we need to stop producing so much CO2. What are you going to do about China and other developing nations? That's a question that can come later. Sure, we need to stop this for now. Go right ahead. The problem was there was no solution to what are we going to do without these coal-fired power plants. right? Like, those people would essentially just have to go with no electricity. There was no plan in place to build solar panels or a wind farm or a nuclear power plant. None of that. There was no solutions to that problem whatsoever. That's the insane part about it, right? Like, some people have questioned me down in the comments section. What do you mean they're insane? That's the insane part. There was nothing to replace it. They're just going to knock these people back, which are mostly Republican states, knock these people back to the 1800s, pre-industrial revolution type of stuff. Like, what? Yeah, that's essentially what they were going to do. And the Supreme Court just blocked it. That's essentially what's happening, because that is not a reasonable regulation to put in, right? But this Chevron deal, it's a really, really big deal. Let's get into it. Executive branch agencies will likely have more difficulty regulating the environment, public health, workplace safety, and other issues under a far-reaching decision by the Supreme Court. The court's 6-3 ruling on Friday overturned a 1984 decision colloquially known as Chevron that has instructed lower courts to defer to federal agencies when laws passed by Congress are not crystal clear. The 40-year-old decision has been the basis for upholding thousands of regulations by dozens of federal agencies, but has long been a target of conservative and business groups who argue that it grants too much power to the executive branch, or what some critics call the administrative state. Quick factoid right here, this was put in place by conservatives back in the day. The Biden administration has defended the law, warning that overturning so-called Chevron deference would be destabilizing and could bring a convulsive shock to the nation's legal system. And they're not totally wrong with that, right? Like, as soon as this goes down, there's going to be a litany of litigation to block a lot of federal regulations and rules. There's going to be a lot of these. So it is going to put a shock to the courts. Do your damn work. That's what you're there for. This is a good thing. The Biden administration has strangled our economy with regulations. Our economy, as a matter of fact, the Obama administration was also strangling our economy with regulations. Every administration, as a matter of fact, except for the Trump administration, which they did in certain areas, but, for the most part, they tried to deregulate a little bit. But every administration since probably 2000, since the turn of the century, has been implementing more and more regulations. Some good, some bad. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the court, said federal judges must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority. The ruling does not call into question prior cases that relied on the Chevron doctrine, Roberts wrote. Here's a look at what the court's decisions and implications for the government regulations going forward. In the decades following the ruling, Chevron has been a bedrock of modern administrative law, requiring judges to defer to agencies' reasonable interpretations of congressional statute. That's the problem, right? We know that the Biden administration, for sure, and the Obama administration were trying to install activist judges on the federal levels. These activist judges were in part allowing the administrative state to impose these regulations without the proper statutory limitations, I guess you could say. They pretty much just took what the administration wanted to do and just ran with it and said, okay, that's fine, regardless of the implications to the economy, regardless of the implications to the American people, regardless of those implications. But the current high court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, has been increasingly skeptical of the powers of federal agencies. Yeah, especially during the Biden administration. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch have questioned the Chevron decision. Ironically, it was Gorsuch's mother, former EPA administrator Ann Gorsuch, who made the decision that the Supreme Court upheld in 1984. Like I said, they were conservatives. With a closely divided Congress, presidential administrators have increasingly turned to federal regulation to implement policy changes. Federal rules impact virtually every aspect of everyday life, from the food we eat and the cars we drive to the air we breathe and the homes we live in. That is right. That is why the price of housing is skyrocketing, because they're putting so many regulations, and the standards for the quality standards of these houses has gone up so much that it's getting outright ridiculous to build houses. Some of these regulations, the construction codes, are just, they're overreaching and they're ridiculous in nature. Trust me. Once again, like I said, I work in this industry. I know exactly some of these regulations and rules and the building codes. It's just way overkill in certain areas. Just in certain areas, it's like extremely overkill. President Joe Biden's administration, for example, has issued a host of new regulations on the environment and other priorities, including restrictions on emissions from power plants and vehicle tailpipes, and rules on student loan forgiveness, overtime, pay, and affordable housing. Right? Thank goodness for this, because once again, that's the only reason the Biden administration was able to implement its student loan forgiveness. They're trying to force car manufacturers to make only electric vehicles. They want them to stop making internal combustion engine vehicles, right? Like, screw just, innovating your way to climate change. Screw that. They can make internal combustion engine vehicles much more clean. As a matter of fact, they've been doing that for decades at this point. The cars these days are way more clean than they were just 20, 30 years ago. But, screw technological advancement. Screw that. We want to go all EV, even though the infrastructure around electric vehicles isn't there. And then they want to shut down coal-fired power plants. But the infrastructure, we don't have enough charging stations, right? The batteries don't last long enough. You can get a lot more miles out of an internal combustion, a traditional vehicle, than you can an electric vehicle. You got to plug it in every single night, just about. And you can't travel too far, right? There's not enough power stations. But they don't have a plan to build more power stations. I mean, they are building more, but not at nearly the rate that they want to replace all traditional vehicles with electric vehicles. By, 2033, I believe? Yeah, that's insane. Can't do that. And the student loan forgiveness. That's the only reason. The Supreme Court struck down Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, and he just did an in-run around the Supreme Court, said, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway, and he did it through the Chevron deference, because they just defer to the administrative state. Those actions and others could be opened up to legal challenges if judges are allowed to discount or disregard the expertise of the executive branch agencies that put them into place. That is a good thing, right? Like, you might think, we need to defer to the experts. Yeah, appeal to authority all you want. If the authority doesn't make sense, if it's not logical, maybe these judges will see the writing on the wall and say, no, we're not going to do this, right? The ramifications of shutting down the coal-fired power plants. That is something that's just insane. I really can't talk about that enough, because a lot of people don't know about that. If they did, they wouldn't be voting for Joe Biden. Right? Like, all those people that are going to be affected by these power plants getting shut down. How do you feel about that? Yeah, I don't think you would want to vote for Joe Biden if you knew that was his plan, was to kill the electric grid. With billions of dollars potentially at stake, groups representing the gun industry and other businesses, such as tobacco, agriculture, timber, and home building, were among those pressing the justices to overturn the Chevron doctrine and weaken the government regulation. Yeah, this is a good thing. David Donye, a lawyer and longtime Natural Resource Defense Counsel who argued the original Chevron case in 1984, said he feared that a ruling to overturn the doctrine could free judges to be radical activists who could effectively rewrite our laws and block the protections they are supposed to provide. That is very funny. He says that because that is exactly what they're doing right now. Joe Biden is putting nothing but radical activists on the federal circuit to get all of his regulations and rules put in place before he leaves office, because that's exactly what's going to happen. He's leaving office. It's just funny that they would mention that, because that is exactly what is happening now. He's got radical activists in his three-letter agencies. He's got radical activists on the federal circuit. That's how he's getting all these rules and regulations just flown through the court system, essentially. They're just passing up logic, passing up any ramifications for these rules. Just mind-blowing what the Biden administration has done to this country. That's why I always say the Biden administration is trying to destroy the country by pushing his ridiculous climate agenda, trying to push the technological bounds of what we can do. We're just not there yet. I totally agree with all these decisions. But, the time scales that he's trying to put out are just insane. They're just utterly unachievable. The net effect will be to weaken our government's ability to meet the real problems the world is throwing at us. Big things like COVID and climate change, Donier said. Yeah, he's not an activist. The court ruling will likely open the floodgates to litigation that could erode critical protections for people and the environment, Moore and other advocates said. For more than 30 years, fishery observers have successfully helped ensure that our oceans are responsibly managed so that fishing can continue in the future, said Dustin Craner of Oceana, another conservation group. He called the case just the latest example of the far right trying to undermine the federal government's ability to protect our oceans, waters, public lands, clean air, and health. It doesn't sound to me that that's what the federal government is doing. A lot of these regulations, see, that's what they're trying to, once again, they're trying to use an emotional argument. Oh, the far-right movement, they're going to damage the environment and damage the oceans and all this. Most of these regulations are going to be put in place because they're logical and they make sense. Some of them don't make any sense whatsoever and should certainly be taken out of effect, taken out of the game, essentially, if you will. But they're trying to appeal to your emotions here. Don't let them do it. A lot of these regulations are going to remain in place because they make sense. We don't want to overfish our oceans. We don't want to dump a bunch of pollutants into the water. People know this. We want to be good stewards of the planet, for goodness sakes, but we can't regulate our industries into the freaking ground, make everything so expensive that people can't afford to buy anything. They can't afford to live their lives, right? We need some freedom from that. We need some deregulation. These people are so worried about the damn environment that they could care less about the societal ramifications of what they're proposing to do. And that's what I'm an advocate of, stopping some of these people. Radical agenda. It's just outright insanity. But don't take their emotional arguments too hard, if you will, because like I said, most of these rules and regulations aren't going to be overturned. We're going to look at the ones that don't make any sense, that actually shackle the industry from flourishing, if you will, and we're going to deregulate those and take the regulation handcuffs off some of these industries and let them flourish without damaging the environment, without damaging our economy, without damaging the planet. Right? We do need some more regulations in certain areas. I'm willing to admit that. We need regulations to keep workers safe, to keep the planet safe. There's all kinds of reasons for these regulations. Like some of the code, the building code, some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. Like triple insulated wire, like what? It's not needed in some places. GFCIs, some of those are not needed. They're now code in Louisiana, at least, in commercial buildings. Every outlet has to be a GFCI. Huh? That makes no sense. When they make breakers, yeah, a breaker box. That's what a breaker box is for. It's just, it makes the building cost more. So price of everything goes up. When stuff costs more to build, when it costs more to manufacture goods, when it costs more to extract the materials to manufacture goods, it makes the price go up. That's why we have inflation, y'all. If they're trying to force the industry to buy, fleets of electric 18-wheelers, of electric semis, you know what I mean? They're far more expensive than traditional semi-trucks. Yeah, that's going to bring the cost of everything up, because those companies have to buy these, and they still have to make money to cover their overhead, right? Like, I understand the argument of, that you're not wanting this company to make billions and billions of dollars in profit. But, those companies do give a lot of that money to charity because of taxes. So it comes back into the economy. trickle down economics or whatever. It is a thing, and it does work. It's always in play. Don't let anybody lie to you. You take the regulatory shackles off of some of these companies, their profits go up, prices will go down eventually, right? It might not be immediate. You might not see any change right away, but eventually you're going to start seeing the ease on prices, the ease on gas, and you're going to start seeing prices maybe stabilize and stay where they're at and not continue to rise due to inflation. And then wages will come up and everything can kind of equalize back out and we can be a booming economy again. Right? But some of the rules and regulations that are put into place are ridiculous. Like some of the regulations around guns. Like all the pistol brace rule and the bump stocks and all that BS. Some of it's just totally unnecessary. You get a mass shooting out there and then all of a sudden lawmakers want to regulate guns into the ground. Right? Like, no, it wasn't a problem before. They just so happened to use a bump stock to do this one shooting or whatever. There's no need to outlaw it because of this one situation. We don't go after vehicles if somebody runs over a bunch of people, right? Like you got a crowd of people and somebody runs over. We don't go after the car manufacturers and try to regulate them into the ground because of it. No, we don't do anything. We go after the person that did it. That's why I don't understand why every time we have one of those mass shootings, the lawmakers try to go after the guns. It's like, what? That makes no sense. You're going to take the rights away from good, upstanding citizens, take their guns away because a criminal broke the law? Criminals don't care about the law, right? Like you can make all the rules and laws you want. You're only restraining the population that cares about the laws. You're not restraining the population that doesn't care about the laws. Criminals don't care about laws. You can take every gun from everybody that's registered with a gun, right? There's still going to be guns in the streets because criminals don't register their guns and they're not going to turn over their guns. So then at that point, the only people with guns will be criminals. By the way, it's illegal to murder people. Obviously, that law doesn't stop people from killing each other. You can give the death penalty to everybody that commits murder. That's not going to stop people from killing somebody. People are still going to do it. That's why I don't understand some of these regulations. Some of them don't make sense. But I think I've rambled on for long enough on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section because I imagine you have some opinions on some of these issues. But that's all I got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and y'all try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.